Villains. We love them, we hate them, we love to hate them. But what happens when you go so overkill on writing your villain that they're not even scary anymore? Alright, let me break this down. We're gonna talk about the most common traps that I've seen in manuscripts that I've worked on that completely flatten out your villain. And I'm gonna give you some easy and logical fixes to avoid this. Good evening, I have got tea and I'm ready. You might notice that I'm in a new location and I have chopped my hair, and I have a new mug. Anyway, yeah, lots of new things happening. Don't get used to it. I'm actually going back to Croatia for a couple of months, so if I do record new videos, it'll be in yet another new location. But I am gonna try and take my trusted purple light with me, so you don't have to worry about that. Alright, without further gibberish, let's jump into the first trap that we're gonna be talking about, and that is that you make your villains way too obvious. So this one happens when the author writes the villain with the knowledge that they are the villain, and so they immediately have other characters dislike them or notice really evil things about them before the villain has actually done anything to deserve that. So the author is basically forcing you to have an opinion on this character just because that's how the author wants you to feel. But this will actually come out kind of like a Scooby-Doo villain. So the way to get your readers to actually hate this character is by lulling them into a false sense of comfort and letting their perception towards this character naturally change along with your narrative characters. So if the narrative character actually trusts the villain, then when the villain finally shows their true colors, it's going to hurt more. She's found a comfortable spot. If we experience these emotions through our narrative characters, then it is going to hurt. It is going to make us, scream, "How dare you? You betrayed us." But if you immediately tell us this person is bad, we should not trust this person because I have a hunch, then you basically just killed an entire character arc and what could have been an awesome subplot. Okay, let's get into the second trap. Your villain is weaker than your protagonist. It's a very easy equation, this one. If your protagonist is already better and stronger and smarter than your villain at the beginning of the novel, then you have absolutely nowhere to go from there. There's no space for challenge or transformation or any kind of character arc for your protagonist if they can already best the antagonist the first time that they meet. The whole point of a physical antagonist is to be that source of conflict that your protagonist just cannot overcome. In many ways, the villain is the main thing that pushes your protagonist into becoming often the best and strongest version of who they are. If you look at the villain as an external manifestation of your protagonist's conflict, then you should be able to understand that without resistance to that conflict, you have no story. Okay, let's move on to the third trap. You don't use them as a mirror. So the previous trap that we talked about brings me straight into the third fix, which is that authors don't often think about using their antagonist as a reflection to their protagonist. When I say a villain should act as a mirror, what I mean is that they should embody the protagonist's dark reflection, or the thing the hero could become if they made different choices. The villain could represent a part of themselves that they are refusing to confront. And you'll probably have noticed this in a lot of stories, that you always get that part where the villain tries to get your protagonist to join them. They will try to convince the protagonist that they are the same because from the villain's point of view, they kind of are. And this trope works best if there is genuinely some truth to it. It means that your hero can be tempted by the offer but then still choose their own path. Or if you want an even more complex outcome, you could have the hero accept, at least for a little while. You can let them actually join forces with the villain until they realize that this is not the path that they want to be on. If you want a simple reflection exercise while you're building your villain, just ask, what truth does my hero need to learn and what lie does my villain refuse to let go of? They are two sides of the same coin. One is trying to heal the wound while the other one is protecting it like it's all they have left. The fourth trap, they don't act logically. When a villain acts against logic, what usually happens is that their decisions stop feeling like human behavior and start feeling like plot service. They do things simply because your story needs conflict, right? But they should be doing it because they need something. The best villains have a philosophy that just almost holds up. It's something that you can nod along to until it tilts a little too far. You'll go, you know what? They kind of have a point. And then several chapters later, you'll be like, oh, wait. So I edited a fantasy manuscript recently where this was actually one of my developmental suggestions to the author. Her antagonist had his own stance on the fictional country's political issues, and in the first draft, this was very obviously an evil stance that the protagonist disagreed with. It was just a sentiment of we must kill everybody else to win. So I recommended making his stance just a little bit more realistic and allowing the protagonist to actually consider it, because it does make sense on paper. So what we ended up doing is we masked his true intentions under something that was more along the lines of we must fight and we cannot just keep turning the other cheek. So that motivation is a little bit harder to categorize as just good or evil, and there is a sense of logic to it. It's only when we see the villain take it too far that we realize that the execution of that idea was actually never the better choice. That tension is what makes the villain seductive, because they're not entirely wrong. They did take a reasonable motivation, they just executed it in a twisted way that only really makes sense to them. Authors sometimes get a little scared to make the villains understandable. Like if readers empathize too much, they'll side with them. But if your reader can come out of your book saying, I get why they did it, even though I don't agree with them, then that means that you've built something realistic. Now tell me, what is the best villain that you have come up with and what makes them terrifying? And if you haven't written a physical antagonist yet, what is the best one that you've read about or seen in other media? Let me know in the comments. Now, if you want to plan a completely new project, you can pick up my free novel planner. It's a workbook that takes you through setting up a quick start for your project without wasting your time so that you can get started writing ASAP. However you want to say that. You can also grab my book, Finish Your First Novel. I don't talk about this nearly as much as I should, and my publisher is probably not really happy about that. So hey, book, by me. It's very pretty, very light, great for beginners. There will be a link to grab both the novel plan and this little book in the description box below. But until next time, trust your heart and the words will come.